Welcome back to The Hook on Woodward Sports Network. Joining us, we've got longtime Detroit news columnist Lynn Henning. Lynn, welcome to the show.
Hi, Pilar.
It's
Good
always
to
great
see
to
you.
have you on.
Well, Darren and Maz, as always, nice to converse with you folks, too.
Good, thanks for coming on, Mr. H. We just call you friend of the show.
Yes.
That's all you are,
Well,
friend of the show.
Better than some people would refer to me. Yeah,
That's right. That's a fact. And I did see your column today. We'll talk about the draft and all of that. But we were talking about Bo Schembechler, and Jim Brandstatter came out over the weekend. And, you know, Jim and Bo had a long history together. And you've been here in Detroit. I don't have to tell you anything about that. But you know the story by now. Last week, Matt Schembechler and a couple of players, one from the 70s, one from the 80s, came out. Kwiatkowski and Johnson, their last names. And they spoke of Dr. Anderson doing bad things to them. Let's just say that. And then they told Bo, and Bo kind of didn't say anything, kind of brushed it under the carpet, kind of told him to get tough, even hit his kid in the chest and maybe gotten a little rough with him and said, I can't hear that kind of stuff. Now today you hear other people coming. People are going to defend Bo Schembechler, of course. So you're in the middle of the story here. Try to fill us in on your take of this whole matter.
It's a classic response that you've seen at Penn State, at Ohio State, with the Catholic Church, in any place where abuse on this level has occurred. You get a divide. You get those that are going to support the institution in any circumstance and simply not believe that what is being assessed here or asserted by people has actually happened, and they're going to kick the can down the road. And then you get the people whose testimony is tragic and compelling and utterly gut-wrenching, and that's what we saw again last week. And there's no more reason to doubt John Vaughn and all the others, hundreds who had that experience with Dr. Anderson, to suggest for a moment that they're imagining things, that there was some kind of conspiracy. No, this happened. Mm-hmm. Deal with it. And the institution is obliged to deal with it. And I think U of M, on balance, is doing that. And that's all you can do in the name of something this tragic. I covered that team during that period, all through the 80s, pretty much, and was around Anderson. I never, obviously, had to go to him for any medical reasons, thank God. But what really has happened there, again, is akin to the desecration of young people that has occurred at these other institutions. And again, there is no denying this.
My question to you, Lynn, is like you said, open up with the Sandusky stuff in Penn State and the Nasser stuff in Michigan State. Is this a bigger? Are we going to find out this is bigger, this is deeper than even this Michigan thing? Is that what do you hope? Because you were around also then, and you know what that U of M and Michigan represents in this state. You know, what's next, I guess, or what do we hope to see? Obviously, there's going to be players talking and victims talking and stuff like this, but what are we looking for, I guess?
That's really the most, I think, disturbing part of this thing, Darren. It's the same situation. I didn't mean to leave out Michigan State and Nasser, which is as horrific as any of these chapters has been. But what it implies, Darren, is that this is a far broader and far more damaging reality than probably has been acknowledged. You look at the Boy Scouts, you look at all of these places where people who've been victimized by elders and by people who are trusted. And their common thread not only is the damage and the destruction they've endured, but the fact that they couldn't say anything for so long. And we all know the reasons. It's tremendously humiliating to have had this violation occur to you. Secondly, you know you're not going to be believed all the time. And thirdly, you're not entirely sure that those that you know have likewise been victimized are going to support you and publicize something that is, again, so deeply wounding and so deeply embarrassing. And this follows the same script. So yeah, Darren, my concern is the same as everyone's here. I think this is hardly an isolated cluster of universities where this kind of thing has been occurring. And again, we only have to look at Michigan State and Nassar, or here with Anderson, or with Sandusky at Penn State, or with the wrestling team at Ohio State, et cetera, on it goes. And the amount of victims out there just leaves you absolutely devastated.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, the big question, and I said to Maz, the smell test to me is, what did Anderson, if this is true, what did Anderson hold over Bo Schembechler? Because that has, to me, just watching TV and movies and being part of life, the smell test there of why he was kept around after this over and over again.
He would not let Canham fire him. Would not.
Right.
No, I think it wasn't a case that Anderson had anything over them, Darren, except he was trusted by those guys.
So that's
they
what
couldn't,
I
they
think
couldn't believe it.
I think that's the important part, Lynn, because you were around there and stuff like this, and it wasn't the fact that it was Bo. It was Bo more or less being like the king of the castle, and these were his guys, and it was his team. We've heard that also, too. So Anderson, being the predator, knew how to manipulate through those, and it was abuse of power.
Oh, no question. And I think, Darren, what you would have seen there is Schembechler, of course, believed that he was all-knowing, omniscient, that he absolutely had his pulse, or had the pulse read in every facet of Michigan football. Mm-hmm. And the idea that Anderson would have been pulling this stuff off and he not knowing about it, you have to remember, Darren, what this would have done for Schembechler is two things. It would have made him feel as though he was somewhat complicit in something so horrible, or that he was naive about it. And we all know Schembechler's ego enough to understand he was not going to countenance any of those kinds of thoughts. He was also judge, jury, and sentencer on any kind of indiscretion with that football team. And this would have implied that other people would need to get involved, that he would be vulnerable to in this particular instance. And Schembechler was such where he was so in control. He was such a Patton, a Woody Hayes, a Bobby Knight, and he was. That is not in dispute and shouldn't be in dispute. He was very much cut from that cloth. That's why, in fact, they had such a kinship among them. He was not going to allow for a moment the idea that something under his control had gotten away and created this kind of utter destruction.
Lynn Henning joins us, Detroit News, longtime columnist. We always pull him out of retirement down in Georgia. And he always comes on with us because he's the man that knows it all here.
He's a friend of the show.
We might as well put Lynn Henning's name on this show. But I want
you
to
always
ask
know
you,
where to go for the cheap help, man.
Hey, listen, Mr. H. Joe Paterno, icon. His buddy, Jerry Sandusky, right there next to the practice field, in the showers with these young men. The Nassar story, Bella Caroli and Mrs. Caroli, right under their noses with those gymnasts. And now Bo Schembechler, right there. I don't get it. They know. They have to know what's going on under their nose. I don't even know the words to get out to you.
Go to Penn State for a moment. Jerry Sandusky retired at age 56. Now, what was that all about? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We all know football coaches don't retire in their 50s. They go right to the last hurrah. And Paterno knew. He, again, didn't want to believe and didn't want to appear vulnerable to something so hideous. It's the same story over and over again. I can tell you from my perspective in the Catholic Church as well.
Terrible.
What used to happen, and what used to happen was this, and this is where no slack can be cut, but back in the 70s, before social science advanced, what they felt they could do was take a pedophile and send them away for 6 months, and they would come back rehabilitated, cured, whatever word you want to use. Social science later learned what we know about alcoholism or any of those kinds of diseases that are not going to go away. They are going to be lifetime conditions. Pedophilia is in that same psychoanalytical field, as I understand it. And what would happen then, rather than take this otherwise nice guy who was liked and respected, plug in Anderson, plug in anybody you want to do here, Jerry Sandusky. They couldn't for a moment conceive that these guys were that evil. And so what would happen? Again, nothing would happen. There would be inaction, or they would move him around, or let Jerry Sandusky retire at 56. Look at all these circumstances. You see the same behavior repeated and repeated. And back to Darren's question, the chilling thought is, how many other institutions have we had something similar going on?
You know, I feel that in this one, this is one of those cases where it's very hard to believe that Bo would do anything wrong, or that Bo knew and wouldn't say anything, right? It's just whether or not we believe he knew, it's hard to believe it. It's hard to wrap our heads around it. It's very difficult to think he didn't know. What do you think should be done with the statue right now? Should it be removed immediately? Should this whole thing be played out and then possibly removed, or should it just stay up?
Pilar, I think that's a very appropriate question today, and I would submit this thought. Make sure with U of M's human resources, as utterly sublime as they are, that you can have a full analysis and investigation of this, and then come to your conclusion how much that head coach knew. You don't have to do it now, and I think it's inevitable that he is going to bear responsibility for this, either because of what he knew or didn't know, or because of action or inaction, however you want to frame that. But I think he's going to pay a price. His legacy is definitely going to pay a price, and should, given the multitudes, clearly from already the testimony, we're learning that it's multitudes of players who were so affected. And there's no reason to think that they weren't, based on the standard report from all the players and their numbers of physical examinations by this monster. And so Bo is going to have to bear responsibility, same as he certainly was happy to take all the adulation gained over 30 and 40 years. And that was earned, but so has this been. And yet I think Michigan, of course, owes it to the community and certainly to the victims to have a comprehensive look at this thing, and then make up your mind as to what the coach's role was in this, directly or indirectly. And I think he's going to pay a price. I think the name is coming off, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if the statue does. But give it its proper time. There's some due process here that I think yet needs to play out.
I think the biggest thing you nailed right there, Lynn, in that whole conversation is that it comes down to Bo's ego, Bo's not that he would ever be naive, but not knowing what goes on. And how many times do you see the collapse of great institutions or empires in history when that person doesn't have the full acknowledgement of what's going on around them? So thanks for bringing light.
As I do too, that the word hubris is really at the forefront of this too. It was with Paterno, it was with Hayes, it was with Knight, it was with, in many instances, people who had been held up as virtual sports deities. Did not want to think that they ever were, frankly, less than deities, certainly when it came to things within their control. And this was something that Schembechler would have viewed as being in his control, and the idea that it would have threatened his omniscience is something he wasn't going to live with.
Mr. H, can we keep you off the golf course for a few more minutes? Take a quick break. Come back,
sure,
talk baseball. All right.
You bet.
More with Lynn Henning coming up. A lot on baseball. I want to talk about this Tiger team. The draft's coming up, and this doctoring of the baseballs. Major League Baseball finally stepping up and saying, hey, guys, enough of the crap. Put down the spider glue and use the rosin bags. More with Lynn Henning on the hook right after this on Woodward Sports.
Welcome back to The Hook on Woodward Sports Network. Joining us today, we've got Lynn Henning, good friend of the show. There you are. Thanks for sticking around. All right, so let's change focus to some MLB now. Still more drama in the MLB. Yep. Now they're cracking down on baseball doctoring. First, I have to ask you what I ask everybody. Do you believe that there is doctoring in baseball right now?
Oh, yeah. I don't think that there's any dispute about that. It's just to what extent and what percentage of the pitchers have been using it, which I think is probably at least half. And that is coming to a screeching halt because I don't think MLB is going to fool around here with the enforcement.
And do you think that now that the MLB is stepping in and saying, okay, enough is enough, the umpires are now able to check whenever they want to see if anything other than the rosin is being used, do you think that this is actually going to stop people from using the foreign substance, or do you think we're still going to be like seeing this more and people are just going to take it a little bit light?
No, two things there, Pilar. I think the suspensions, those are real, and you don't want to experience any of those things. You also don't want to be called a cheater. And if you look at the Astros, you know that there can be a permanent price paid there. But no, they're serious about this, and I understand again why players are going to do things until the powers that be say no more. And then it gets down to a competitive advantage or disadvantage. Do you want to be not using stuff when other guys are using spider tack and getting 200 more RPMs on your curveball? No. And so MLB, as well as the umpires, have got now the obligation to get this cleaned up. And what you're going to see is, and I think it's already begun, is more hitting in a sport that needs more hitting. So this is right and proper.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Mr. H, I'll tell you this. Listen to this stat. This was the slash line for Major League Baseball hitters from April 1st, which was opening day, to June the 4th, which was just 10 days ago. They were hitting 236, 312 on base, 395 on the ops. June the 5th, after details emerged about the umpires will start conducting foreign substance checks, Major League hitters, June 5th through the 13th, their average went up to 247, 319, and 417 on the slugging. So it went up 12 points. And this brings us to the guy who kind of got this kind of started, maybe. His name is Brian Harkins. He was the Angels clubhouse manager, a clubhouse attendant for the visitors from 1990 till just like last year. And he had quite the clientele. And Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, of course, Garrett Cole. This was a tweet that a text from Garrett Cole to Bubba. It says, "Hey, Bubba, it's Garrett Cole. Here it comes." This is January of 2019. "I was wondering if you could help me out with this sticky situation." The text continued with a winking emoji. "The stuff I had last year seizes up when it gets cold. Can you come up with, or do you have a mix that will play better in cold weather?" And Bubba writes back, "Hey, Cole, the only thing I could think to do is put more tar in it and less motor stick. I'll play around with it and see." That was on Garrett Cole's phone. And, and I know you know the story of this guy. Sports Illustrated did an expose on him. But take us to that. I mean, he has got a who's who of Cy Young pitchers as his clients, so to speak.
Yeah, and again, I don't think there's really much that is mysterious about this, Maz. They've been using junk. And what extent the really super glue is being used, the spider tack, you get varying assessments there and estimations. But I think it's been pretty significant. And you got to get that out. You've got to get the rosin and the sunscreen, all of that tacky stuff. That's really helping these guys do indecent things with their spin rates and making it really extraordinarily tough on hitters who already have it tough enough in a game where hitting is the most difficult thing in sports.
More players are getting hit by pitch, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah.
And those guys are throwing now at 100 miles an hour. They don't need spider tack. This is going to have to be corrected, and the first thing you do is you get stuff back to legality, and that means you get this junk out. Yeah, you can use a rosin bag, but you're not going to be able to fill it with everything from the lab, and that is simply justice at work there.
I love the fact, obviously it's interesting, like Maz said, is that they're going to be policing in that, but that's got to be something that'll slow down the games. And is this something that do you believe that this came to fruition because of all the no hitters that happened earlier in the year? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like we've been talking about no hitters here, there, everywhere. Guys,
almost 7 of them.
Right, guys, and Carlos Rodon almost had
He almost
his
had
second
another
of the
one.
season the other night against Tigers. So is this just the evolution of baseball, like the next thing? Because this is isn't this along the lines of the Astros banging the stuff and just trying to find the edge or stealing signs or
Steroids.
you know what I mean? How does this sit with baseball? Does this hurt it in its popularity, or the fact that they're getting ahead of it help?
Yeah, that's why they want to crack down here, because they're as tired of a game being absolutely dominated by pitchers as most fans are. They want to get some offense back into the game. And again, it's tough enough, Darren, when you got guys routinely now throwing 97, 98, 99, 100. It's just the whole game has just utterly exploded with velocity and with movement. And something that was already so difficult, so challenging, so incredibly hard to really achieve, and that is a base hit in a baseball game, just got tougher with the fact that the inmates here have found some files and some shivs and some stuff.
No pun intended.
No, but really, and so they're going to have to take that out, and they will. And I think, you'll see a little more equilibrium. Part of this jump, I think, in offense has been seasonal. Usually after the cold weather departs, you get offense picking up, and I think that's been part of the story. But I don't think, Maz, to your point there on the stats, that's all coincidental. So we could see a little more hitting and a few more runs here very, very quickly as these guys decide they're going to leave the super glue in the clubhouse.
That would be nice. Don't forget, they've been cheating forever. I mean, Gaylord Perry, for crying out loud. He was what a hero he was.
Yeah. Well, and legacy is still important, like we were saying earlier. And Gaylord's halo not only tipped, it pretty much crashed to the ground. And I don't think anyone wants to be remembered that way. These guys have a degree of professional pride.
Sure.
And criminality isn't really part of what they want to be remembered by.
Lynn Henning, Detroit News columnist, he wrote something today, obviously, on the draft coming up pretty soon, a few more weeks. And the Tigers will be on the clock picking third, although in your column, you didn't have to dig in. I mean, we all know here in Detroit, they should be picking first because they only played 60 games last year. If you combine the 2 seasons, they were still by far the worst team in baseball. And you got freaking team like the Red Sox picking fourth. They're one of the best teams in baseball.
Look at this guy over here whining because you've got the first overall. Look at how many first overall picks you've had. You're the freaking Edmonton Oilers or the freaking MLB.
Who are you talking about?
Pick the third guy.
Who are you talking about?
Torque, Green.
I understand that, but
Mize.
what Lynn wrote today was it was a flawed system. Go ahead.
You didn't want the Red Wings pick in fourth in that draft last year, not after they'd won 17 games. This is simply a matter of justice. And if you're going to have a democratic process in the draft, which you really ideally need in order to get farm systems reseeded in baseball, hockey, I don't care where, then you owe yourself the commitment that it's going to be a fair distribution. And 60 games versus 162 is no measuring stick by which to measure a draft order, Darren. And that's why I think this thing is preposterous. Is it a felonious crime? No. But if, again, draft integrity means anything, and I would have thought it would have to Manfred, you don't get carried away with your 60-game season and use the draft to sanction your playoffs, which in fact ran pretty well, as I also wrote today. That was not anything that needed enhancement by a draft order. And in fact, he's really, I think, diminished a very good story in 2020 with a draft order here that really makes no sense.
No, I agree, Lynn. It's exactly the same thing I'm bitching and moaning about. How does Detroit get the 4th pick with the worst team?
Yeah.
Whatever. You're talking because it's about integrity, right? We're talking about all these things that are not integrity. So it looks like Rob Manfred, the commissioner, called Gary Bettman, the commissioner of NHL, and said, how do we screw this up the best?
Right.
Because that's what it looks like. And I agree with your column, and it's a joke and all that stuff. I was trying to make Matt feel better that we've had enough. It's not like we haven't had ones, right?
We just haven't hit on 'em.
Maybe Al can hit on a 3.
I hope so.
So, but you're right. It's a joke because it's down to, like, we're talking about these things like scuffing the ball and corking the bats and, stealing signs and stuff like that. And that's sort of the in of the baseball. The draft process and everything around how to build it, you said it has to be solid, and this is a joke.
It is. They're still going to get a good player with that 3rd pick. I mean, there's no doubt that they're going to have a real prize there. But they shouldn't also be drafting deeper in those subsequent rounds, and that's where things add up. And it just, if you're going to have a draft, again, built on the principles of fairness and equal distribution, then you don't base a 2021 draft order on 60 games. That's nonsense.
Do you think the Tigers are showing you a light at the end of the tunnel right now? Because I think they're actually a fun watch these days.
Yeah, everybody says that, and I thought that's what I wrote actually before the season, Maz. I said they weren't going to really like the win-loss record this year, but they were going to find an entertaining baseball team beginning to emerge, and that's simply the way the cycles work. They're going to really like, I think, next year's because out of spring camp, I think kids like Torkelson, Riley Green, Dylan Dingler have got a chance to even make the club in Florida. And those kids' talents are genuine. So it's all a matter of after you've crashed and burned and cratered, then you begin to move northward. And that is the way it goes in pro sports. And that's the way this rebuild was going to happen. It was going to be an extended rebuild because of such a mess at the end with red ink and bad contracts, et cetera. But now you're seeing what really, frankly, was in the stars all along. And I think you're going to like baseball in this town for the foreseeable future.
Hey, quick answer on this before we let you go. Next month, they're drafting 3rd. Hitter or pitcher? I've had my eye on Kumar Rocker from Vanderbilt for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think they need a position player, right?
Well, they do, and I understand Kumar Rocker, Maz, has got a lot of celebrity to him. So does Jack Leiter of Vanderbilt. And I saw both those guys pitch, by the way, at Gainesville, Florida last month. I went down for the weekend specifically to see him. Last week, I went to San Diego to see Marcelo Meyer, who is the shortstop, the prep shortstop the Tigers would really like to have.
Pittsburgh's got a crack at him.
Yeah, they're not sure that they can keep him away from Pittsburgh or even perhaps from the Rangers, but he's the one that they would like. If they don't get him, then I think they're going to settle on a pitcher, whether it's Leiter or even more likely is Jackson Jobe, right-handed prep kid out of Oklahoma City, who is really something. So I think you'll like the pick. I just think you'd probably like it better. And to your point, they need a foundational shortstop in this organization that they don't have right now, which is why I think Meyer is certainly the most attractive.
All right, Mr. H., we appreciate you coming on. We'll chat with you maybe next month when the draft's close.
Okay, Maz. Good
Thanks,
talking
Lynn.
with you,
Good
Darren.
talking.
As always.
Thanks, Lynn. We'll
Lynn
chat
Henning.
soon.
Thank you, buddy.
Sure, guys.
Friend of the show.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Lynn Henning,
Brings
Detroit
a smile
News.
to everybody's
He
face.
is. Give him a read today on DetroitNews.com, by the way. And follow him at Lynn_Henning with 2 N's.
Yeah. All right, guys, when we come back, it is that time of the day for us to qualify somebody to represent the Hook on our latest promo, 25K Kick for Crypto. So start getting ready to give us a call, 313-552-6322.
We'll show you a competition when we come back as well. We have the video.
Oh,
It's not
boy.
much of a competition, by the way.
You don't want to go anywhere. You're tuning into The Hook on Woodward Sports Network.